I'm a board member of the German coalition to abolish the death penalty. Twice in my life I found myself in front of that window, staring at a man who was trapped on a gurney. And with my own eyes, I saw them being killed right in front of me. I witnessed the executions of Clifford Burgess in 1998 and of Kevin Kinsey in 2006. Kevin Kinsey claimed he was innocent. To be honest, I can't judge if he really was. But I know for sure that the representation by his defense lawyer must have been very bad. Kevin was in prison for about 2 years before his trial started, and he met his defense lawyer 3 days before the trial for the very first time. Clifford Burgess, who was my first pen pal on Texas death row, was not innocent. He indeed was guilty of 2 heinous crimes. He murdered 2 men during 2 different robberies. He slashed the throat of the first one, and he shot the second one. My honest sympathy is with the victims and their relatives. I do not excuse what Cliff has done in any way. I got to know Cliff Burgess 11 years after his crimes, when he was on death row awaiting his execution. The man I got to know was no longer the one who committed those horrible crimes. He was compassionate, tender, and caring. Although I knew what he had done, it seemed barely conceivable he had been able to kill people in such a brutal manner. Nobody is born a murderer, and Cliff wasn't either. He was the 8th child of a manic depressive and alcoholic drug-addicted mother. When Cliff was 11 months old, all the children were taken away from their mother by the authorities due to neglect and abuse. Only when she had sorted her life out did she get the children back one by one. When it came to Cliff, she declared that she had enough children, had no use for him, and waived her parental rights to the state. After staying in 2 different foster homes, he was adopted at the age of 2 by parents who divorced 2 years later. At the age of 4, Cliff was given to the parents of his adoptive father and was raised by them. But they gave him very little love and understanding. As a young adult, he quickly felt at home in the company of drinkers and drug users, took drugs like LSD himself, and drank a lot of alcohol. Because of alcohol and drug abuse, he was kicked out of college and later suspended from the army. After a failed attempt to sort out his life, he ceased to care about anyone or anything anymore, including himself. In his own words, "I went out and bought a case of beer, 5 hits of LSD, some speed, some cigarettes, and I began a very self-destructive spree of drugs and crime that ended 65 days later with me in jail, suspected and guilty of 2 murders. Cliff never blamed his childhood for his crimes. He never blamed anyone but himself. He accepted full responsibility and said that only he himself and his actions had brought him to death row. But I wonder, if Cliff had experienced a better childhood, if he'd been raised by loving and caring parents, would he have become a murderer? Somehow I feel things would have turned out differently for him. It's my belief that not only the murderer, but society too, has a responsibility. Cliff Burgess lived on Texas death row for 12 years before he was executed. I'm convinced he really changed during that time. According to his own statement, his occupation with art and painting contributed fundamentally to this change. His painting enabled him to look inside himself, acknowledge and deal with the depth of his own nature for the first time. His art was a way of changing himself from an angry youth to a young man who had empathy and love for people, according to his lawyer. Another essential aspect for Cliff that contributed to his change was his faith in God, which he discovered during his years in prison. Whatever personal views one holds, the fact is that this faith gave Cliff an unbelievable amount of strength and inner peace. Out of this faith, Cliff learned and accepted that honesty was the right thing and admitted to his crimes in the full knowledge this confession would cost him his life. I am convinced Cliff regretted his previous actions deeply, with honest heart, and would have done everything to have been able to undo the sorrow he had caused. You may ask if Cliff only was play acting? No, I don't think so. Several reports from fellow inmates confirm that he really changed and was not a pretender. One wrote about him, "Let me tell you, on more than one occasion I saw the man cry, not because he wanted to make a show or anything. We both know Buggy was not a small man, but I also saw him more than once walk away when he was being threatened or taken advantage of. It's not very often in a place so filled with both hate and violence that you see the man like Buggy was. I just could never imagine him killing another human being." In fact, he, like many others who were on death row, had committed murder. But human beings are able to take responsibility for their actions and change.